Let's take a look at what's going on now in the accompaniment to Wonderful Tonight. I talked a little bit before that you could either play it with a pick or with your fingers. The most important thing, though, is that you keep a steady arpeggio going, 8 notes per measure, or 7 if you decide to leave off the last one just before a change, and keep, if you're doing it with a pick, alternating down and up, and if you're using your fingers, using the proper finger for each string. The chord changes, though, are very easy, and this is a great time to work on putting your fingers down in the order you need them. So you're going to get with start. If you're looking at the tablature right now, let's take a look at that first. So I'm just going to talk about the first 4 measures, because pretty much what happens in the first 4 measures is about 95% of the song. So all you're going to do is play your G chord and pick out the notes one at a time. You could just practice that. You could even practice that without even a chord on, just to get good at doing this. Keeping a steady alternating pattern going from the 6th to the 4th strings. You're skipping the 5th string and then running through the rest. Now, when you're changing from G to D with F sharp in the bass, and again we talked about you could either use your thumb for the F sharp or your first finger. I'm going to show you both ways in just a second. The really important thing to practice there is not putting down all 4 of those fingers, or 3 fingers and a thumb, at the same time. Don't try to slam it on. Big reason for that is if you were just strumming that and one note came out a little dead, listen to this now. I didn't have 2 of those notes very clean. But when I strum it, you can't tell that. But when I pick it, it sounds clunky. So in order to make sure that every string comes out clean, you want to put your fingers down one at a time in the order you're playing them. Now with that D chord, that means that the first thing I'm going to play is the 6th string. So I got to get either my thumb or my index finger on the 6th string. So I'm coming from the G chord. I'm going to do it first with the thumb, which means I also have to change hand positions into baseball position. So I bring my hand up, my wrist up higher, I slam my thumb down on the 6th string, and then start playing. And I don't even worry about the rest of my fingers until I get to those strings. So it's a progressive thing, going thumb, index, ring finger, middle finger, because that's the order you're going to play them in. So you're putting that D down with those in that order. If you're playing the D with your first finger, which I recommend, if you're playing this on a nylon string guitar or anything, if your hand is not big enough to wrap your thumb around, don't even worry about it. You're going to play that note with your index finger. The F sharp, so your index finger, finger 1, goes to the 6th string, and then you work on putting down your 2nd finger, your 4th finger, and then your 3rd finger. Just before you hit each one of those strings. That'll look like this. Then I'm going to go to a C chord and do the same thing. I need my 3rd finger first, then my 2nd finger. Then I worry about my 1st finger. Now the natural way that most people learn to put down a C chord is 1st finger first. Roll it on kind of like that. This time it has to go exactly the opposite way. Really useful technique to get down. And then it goes to a D chord. And I just have a very straight, in that measure, the 4th measure of the tab, I have just a 7-note arpeggio, which means we're going to end on the D on a down and leave basically a rest there, or let it ring for the whole beat, while we then get the G chord back on. Great way of playing that. That would be the simplest way to play every one of the chords in the song. Now, as you work on the song more, mix up the way you play the notes. I've got a few other measures kind of penciled in where I show you a little different pattern. Like when we get to measure 19 on page 2, we've got a G followed by G with F sharp in the bass. So we hit 4 notes on the G chord, and then I change to F sharp in the bass, and I really don't even need any more notes in there. You also could have played D with F sharp in the bass right here. I don't want to go too much into there. We're trying to simplify this a little bit. And then to E minor. But the last 2 bass notes on that E minor, I want to be passing bass notes leading me up to the C chord that's coming after it. So I'm going to hit an A on the 4th beat as a down, and a B on the 4th and as an up, followed by the C chord. right there on that D chord, I played 8 notes. I put an extra up in there on the last on the third string. So let me see. Is there anything on the next page I need to talk about? Let me find the next page. Don't go away. Oh, let's save that for a second. Because in the bridge, I have a little bit more elaborate example of some of the stuff that you could do just as an experiment. Okay, but in the verse and the intro, you really should keep it very steady, very straight, and just keep a really steady alternating thing going. Practice along with the play along segment that I have a little bit later here, and you'll be in good shape. The bridge starts with a C chord, and you can be checking the chord progression on the chart where we've got an intro, a verse with 3 different endings depending on which verse you're singing, and then the bridge. And the bridge has a C chord, and in the tablature I just picked out another way of randomly playing the notes. Here's what that is, the way I have that written. Oops. And I'm at the end of that D. I'm in measure 35, I guess? 34? 1, 2, 3, 4. 34. I've got an open G hit just before the C chord. Oh yeah. And in the next measure, we just strum a D chord while he sings a cappella, basically, the last line in there. So don't take religiously what I have in the bridge. It's just another example of what I'd like you to try to do, making up your own sequence of the arpeggios with a couple of passing bass notes leading into a C chord, the A and the B leading up to C each time. So that is really all that is happening in the accompaniment to Wonderful Tonight. I'll talk really briefly about the arrangement, just so you know what's happening here, and that is, if you want to play along with the album, my play along is not going to be the complete song, because we're going to be working in the melody, and we'll just run through each part once. But if you want to play along with the album, the introduction is the G to D with F sharp to C to D done twice, an 8-measure intro. Then we get into verse 1, and notice I have 3 separate endings. At the end of verse 1, we have the C chord and the D chord, followed by the intro. Now that intro is played only one time. And the intro, by the way, is when the lead is always doing this. Or mostly. And then we go back and do the second verse. We go to a party verse. And that is followed by 2 extra measures of G, and I think in the tab I don't have any specific thing in there for the G. Right, there is a short little lead. And then heading off into the bridge. But so the second ending is just 2 measures of G heading straight to the bridge. When the bridge finishes, there's a short little instrumental, which is the introduction again played twice before it goes into verse 3. And verse 3 has a bit of a tag. So the third ending, he sings a descending F sharp in the bass, E minor with D in the bass, hitting an open D right there. So again, I'm in the third ending. That's where the bracket says 3 and it says G with F sharp in parentheses, E minor, D in parentheses. Those parentheses just mean, in the charts I put together, that it's that bass note added to the chord you just had. So we've got G for half a measure, add the F sharp in the bass for the second half of the measure, to E minor, 4 notes, 4/8 notes, adding an open D in the bass, which really means you can take off the whole chord. Hit just 4 open strings going from the 4th to the 1st, to a C chord, and a D chord, and back to an intro as the ending. And it's going to end with, and I'm just playing a high G chord up here for the heck of it, just to confuse everything. So that's really most of what you need to think about to play the accompaniment. Be sure to check in the play-along segment that I have coming up. And if you're working on the accompaniment, just play along with me and make sure that you keep the alternating down and up always happening at the speed of the 8th notes with the metronome that we're going to have running there too. If you're playing the melody, really do the same thing too, but we'll take a look at the melody and the lead in the next chapter.